Welcome to Module 5. So, I don't have anything to say about my promotional emails. Nothing like that this week. Certainly hope everybody got through the snowstorm okay. We had a couple days off here, so my girls were outside building snowmen and a snow fort. So that's what we have in our front yard right now. Couple of shout outs. One is to Whitney for your Circle of Courage post and the morning meeting and greeting. And I think there's so much value in that. It brings me back to something I recall in my time in the principal role years ago. And it was an elementary school, a K through 3. One of the practices that had been going on in the school prior to when I arrived, every morning each classroom had a portable whiteboard, not very big, and when they did their circle in the morning, they would write down kind of their class news, and they would have different students go up and write things, and if they weren't able to, then the teacher or somebody else would write it for them. And they would also, for the younger kids, maybe do a couple pictures to go along with it. And then they took that and put it out into the hallway on an easel. So up and down the hallways, there were these easels. And for the first 2 hours of the day, the easels remained out there. And as students would pass between classes, Phi-Ed, gym, and everything like that, their teachers had them pause and read the news that the other classes had written. And as in the principal role, I went, of course, and read everyone and put a little note on it. But boy, that was popular, and that came out of that meet and greet. Elizabeth, you were oh, all right. My handwriting is not always the best, but you're talking about Daily 5 and how you allow students to choose the order of the activities. Again, that goes into the step above where students have innate needs met, but also the sense of control over environment. So nice job with that. And Susie, a very powerful mission statement. You got down toward the bottom and you addressed purpose, and I had a post I followed up with purpose and agency, just being something that I'm hearing a lot more of in my work with schools and school safety, especially purpose and agency. Something that is missing often in students who feel they need to bring violence into the school setting, a lack of purpose or agency. Not always, but that's become kind of a pattern that's starting to prevail a little bit. So something funny, pulled up for gas tonight on a vehicle that I've owned for 7 years. I might have shared this once before, but not sure, again, which side to put the gas on. I know there's a little arrow. It's kind of over there, but I did choose wisely. So I don't know. It's not like the old days when I grew up in the gas went in the back. You pull the license plate down. That's where you fill up with gas. That you can't forget. So I want to talk about Module 5. So what we have coming up is the Scavenger Hunt. So currently, if you're not in a school, what you're going to need to do is to find somebody who is currently a teacher. So that could be somebody else in class, a school that you've been working with for possible practicum experience. Could be the district where you reside. It shouldn't be that hard to find a teacher, and ask the teacher the to describe what happens with the teaching setting if you're not able to directly have access to that setting yourself. So, but again, that scavenger hunt, sometimes people will say, well, Dave, currently I'm not teaching. I'm at home right now, and so how should I do this? And so, well, you can, find a teacher, find somebody you worked with, somebody who's in a district, somebody in class, and use them. So we talk a lot about co-teaching this week, and what I want you to do is really, when you're observing, are you really seeing co-teaching? I mean, be honest about it. Are you really seeing co-teaching, or are you seeing the regular education teacher teach, special education teacher more in a support, almost an aid type role? That's what I see most of the time. So, view that with a critical eye. And it's okay, to say that's what's happening. But is there anything being done then to address that, to change that practice? Co-teaching, you also want to look at common planning time and maybe ask some questions of teachers of saying, when do you have time to get together to talk about common assessments and, third grade lesson plans and how everybody is doing? Maybe there's some, again, item analysis needs to be done or something like that. But how do you plan for next week? Is it just you, or do you get together with some of the other teachers, or how does this work? So that's going to be telling, again, because without common planning time, co-teaching is virtually impossible to do that effectively. PLC, professional learning community time, is not common planning time. PLC time is time to look at data and to improve professional practice, but it is not a time to design lesson plans. I did post an IEP at a glance document that was shared by a student who took this course before, and if you don't already have a document like that in your district, it's something that is fairly common, but you might want to consider an IEP at a glance that is then shared with the classroom teacher. We talk about inclusion. When a classroom teacher is having to go through, a 30-page IEP, and if you can condense the main parts of that, not that you're disregarding this document, but if you can condense, here's the goal, strengths of the child, some approaches that have worked, that into a document, like one page, that is going to help that teacher a lot, and you're going to get a lot more buy-in for inclusion and actually having your accommodations carried out to fidelity. So it's a tricky road a little bit because, again, I know a lot of districts do it. It's arguable if that really is a IEP document, it's just a subset of that, but as long as the teacher has access to the full IEP, whether it's through Infinite Campus, Skyward, or whatever system, or if there's some file system that they can access the IEP, which of course they should be able to, then I think you're fine if that's present and you're doing IEP at a glance. But that IEP at a glance is a lifesaver for a teacher that's trying to process, a lot of information, preparing curriculum, and the time you spend with that teacher and be able to reference back to that document. Actually, when I was doing my internship, again, years ago, so like 20 years ago, it was more than 20 years ago, when I was doing my internship, it was a larger district, and they had this process going already. And what they would do is the fourth grade teachers, for example, would meet with the fifth grade teachers. So this would be done like on an in-service day. And they would go through one at a time the IEPs of the fourth grade students who are going up to fifth grade. So this was done at the end of the year. And this is the way the process was back then. They had a picture of the student popped up on a screen, and they had about 5 minutes to talk about that student, and then they had a one-page summary. And it was extremely helpful because people receiving the students then had an idea of how to prepare their classroom, their teaching style, and you know, if there were any motivators, any triggers. I remember one thing that will always stick with me. It was a teacher saying, "Do not leave the 5¼ inch floppy disk lying around your classroom because the student will take them apart." So I don't think any of us could probably even find a 5¼ inch floppy disk. I had a student approach me with one of those like 3½ diskettes and was kind of quizzing me. "Have you ever seen one of these?" I'm like, yep. No, I used those in my Apple IIe to, no, actually my Apple IIe was the 5¼ floppy. So yeah, that was even before then, but I'm just like, yeah, I remember that technology. I remember a car with a tape deck, you know, and now they're coming out, the new vehicles don't even have CD players, just like MP3. So yeah, had an 8-track player too, record player. So, but funny how time passes. But I'll remember that comment, and that receiving teacher was like, okay, I'll make sure that I put those away, because apparently the kid would take the inside out and stuff like that on the floppy disk. So one thing is also be observant for what I call forced inclusion, or it's basically where administration says, hey, everyone is going to be included. And you can obviously see from being in there hasn't been any preparation that's been done through common planning time. But again, this isn't a knock on teachers. It's just it's this structure, it's a situation that they're in. If you see that, please, you know, talk about it. Talk about how the teachers feel about it, how you perceive they feel about it, if anything's being done. If there's anything you find out, hey, was this an initiative that started 2 years ago under a superintendent who's now left? But be perceptive to that. Also look for push-in services. Those are really picking up steam, such as occupational therapy being served in the classroom, physical therapy coming in the classroom, speech in the classroom. And of course, I mean, there's some of those things that you're going to have to do in pull-out. I mean, we have a 700-pound swing structure, you know, in our therapy room. Well, of course, and it's not mobile, so there are going to be things, but we do a lot of push-in therapy, and I think teachers appreciate that, and you get to see the child in a more authentic context. But also, there are kingdoms out there where people do not want other people in their classrooms. So again, you know, just keep your eyes open and see what you see. And I think a question to ask is, has any professional development been done here around co-teaching? Did you go to a conference about co-teaching when you started, or have you gone to a conference? You know, have you gone, you and the regular ed teacher? No? Okay. Would you like to? Is that something someone has talked to you about? Those kind of discussions, because in order to do co-teaching in an effective manner, again, the teachers need professional development together in common planning time. There are other areas discussed this week, station teaching and co-teaching and assist and things like that. So, you know, those are all addressed. And I like station teaching too. I think there are some neat advantages to that. I do remember, and I don't know if I shared this story before or not, I teach some different classes and I do a lot of different lectures, not lectures, fireside chats kind of like this, which I wish I had my fireplace on at the moment because it is 52 on the Camp North Star weather dial. So it's a reference to a 1978 movie with Bill Murray if you want to look that one up. So, but I remember a school district that it was probably a week before school started. Principal or the superintendent met with all of the staff during, hey, you know, sort of welcome back to school in service in their gym or auditorium, whatever it was, and said, guess what? Not really, like guess what, but we are going to be a completely inclusive school this year. There will be no special education rooms. Everything is going to be delivered in the regular education classroom. And like that was it. So take the next 2 days that you have to plan, work it out. Custodians are going to be available, start to move materials. And it was chaos. It was chaos. And what was driving it was overpopulation. The elementaries were growing, didn't have place for kids. So they liberated the special education rooms, used those as some regular education classrooms, and then basically special ed on a cart is what happened. Art on a cart, but a lot of things like that. That model, they had a very rough year. And I knew that district quite well. I think a couple of rough years until they really got around to getting the professional development, and the teachers themselves just took that on to learn how to co-teach the best they could within that structure. But there wasn't common planning time or anything like that. Nothing changed like that. So it was really a mess. So that's a bad example of inclusion. And if hopefully you'll never be a part of that, and have those discussions. Be on discussion teams about inclusive practices, because that's pretty rare that that's going to happen. But again, there are tendencies sometimes for schools to swing the pendulum pretty far over, and that might be a push from the school board too. So as someone who is taking an inclusion class, you can talk to inclusion in a much more comprehensive way than a lot of your peers outside of maybe students that have been in special education courses. But so you can see the advantages of inclusion, which I think there are many, but also like inclusion has to have a side which is a more restrictive environment. You have to have that range of services, and how important that is, because once you lose that, and then everybody has to be included, well, then you have some students where you just are not going to be able to meet their needs in that specific setting. And that could be because just because of sensory feedback, they cannot tolerate the light or the noise. Well, there are certain environmental changes in that you can't make because it's going to affect 20 other students. So but yeah, this is an exciting module. At least I think it's exciting. I look forward to reading your write-ups on this, and be candid and things, and say, if I was here, this is what I would like to see, or this is a question I would have for administration. Anything like that. Or somebody said that they were doing this and then they stopped and nobody really ever said why, or we don't have any idea how teachers get picked to co-teach. So things like that. Thank you for being active posters. I really appreciate that. It makes the class richer. We have very good discussions that go on. You've been very timely with making your post. And again, we're I think a month away from the end of class, so it's going to be winding down. And then when we get to that last module, that module is longer, so it gives you time to address your Bill Porter plan. And by that time, everything we will have covered, plus your tacit knowledge, your previous experiences, you'll all blend together into that Bill Porter plan. Won't be a problem for you. Be a fun activity, but you want to represent your learning within that. So this is it, folks. It's going to be a 20-minute fireside chat here, and I'm heading up where it's actually warm upstairs. So have a great module, and I will be back for module 6.